Carl and Liam here from Games, Brains and a Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short. And it's tier list time. We are returning to the world of Goosebumps. We've done a tier list for season 1. We've done a tier list for season 2. This tier list is for season 3 and 4, explaining why it is simply because season 4 only has 4 episodes. So we're not going to separate that into its own tier list. We thought we'd combine season 3 and season 4 into one. And then there'll be one more tier list surrounding Goosebumps to come, where we take the top episodes from all 3 previous tier lists, put them into one tier list, and then hopefully we'll end up deciding what we consider to be the best, or maybe even really ranking them as the best episodes in Goosebumps TV series history. This focuses on 3 and 4, and we are going to rank them as we have with the others in the best, good, okay, meh, and the worst. This is going to be a series, a tier list that may not see, in my opinion, many actually get the best, but we will see as we talk them through. The idea being we're going to focus on things that we remember really from the episodes as to why it perhaps deserves its position. Beginning with episode 1 of season 3, it is Shocker on Shock Street. We watched this a very long time ago, right? Yeah. So the basis of this then is clearly this. How much do I remember from it? And you know what I remember Shock Street? It's how it looks. It is a great example of a big set, great animatronics, great outfits, all put together in an intriguing story that has a delightfully goosebump twist, I think.
Yeah, I think the twist is probably, I think the twist is very memorable, but it's one of those ones that I remember commenting on how it was impossibly difficult to call beforehand. So I guess I get some credit for that. And yeah, had some nice sets with the whole the ride, and yeah, the dad character was a fun eccentric scientist type character. So yeah, but where would it go in the tier list? That's the question. I think it definitely wouldn't go in the best. I think that's fair to say. I think I would probably place it in okay.
Oh, so I was leaning towards good.
I think if there was a middle between okay and good, it would go there. But...
Okay, you know what? It's the first one. Let's start with putting it okay. I see no reason, because ultimately what I do like about it isn't necessarily enough to explain, or at least enough to warrant its 22-odd minute run. So we'll start with okay. It's a starting point, right? So yes. That's our bar. A bar that isn't reached with My Best Friend is Invisible. Listen, I remember one thing about this episode, and it is the ending. And it is the worst effect in all of Goosebumps history. And it is the face in the back of their heads, the face, the eyes and the mouth superimposed over hair. It is beyond stupid looking. It's one of the dumbest reveals / twists I've ever seen. It's not clever, particularly as the episode's story based around, oh, I've got a friend that's a ghost, or a friend that's invisible next door. And it's then revealed that, oh, no, actually, this is a survivor of humanity that was turned invisible by his parents because aliens came to Earth, took all over, and eat humans, I guess, or whatever. And that's them. And it's like, the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? The worst for me.
Yeah, I mean, the twist in this is pretty insane. Again, one of those really mad ones that would be impossibly difficult to ever see coming, and it's up in the air for you personally of whether or not you enjoy the twist. But I do think, unfortunately for the episode, one of the things that does stick with you is that awful effect of the face in the back of the head, and whether or not this is just one of those twists that just takes it a bit too far, of like ridiculousness. So, on that note.
The worst?
The worst. Is that? I think there were certain aspects for that. Yeah, you think so?
Well, name a positive aspect from the story if you can.
Well, the mystery surrounding like what's going on and stuff. There is some like intrigue there, I thought, and the twist, while it is ridiculous, is like there's some creativity there, but
right. We'll put this in meh only on the promise that if the next one that goes in meh, if there is another one, if that is better than this, then it gets moved down.
That's the thing, is that it would be if I could possibly remember what we'd put in like worst to compare it to in previous tier lists, but I'm afraid I don't have that information at hand. So yeah, I think
it's irrelevant though, because you're not comparing it to them. You're comparing it to. We're not comparing. To be fair, we're not comparing it to any other episode. It's where it stands on its own.
Okay, well, like you said, I think I'll accept it going in the worst. Then I'll accept it based on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
if we're not comparing it, then I'll accept that.
It's in the worst. I think it is. It generally is, people. Okay. Also a contender for the lower half, of my opinion, is The House of No Return, which is just your basic ass ghost story. The only thing I can say that I really remember, or at least strong in this, is that it's got a kind of gleefully dark ending, and the ghost to the couple kind of revealed as exactly what it suggested they are. Does kind of nice, is a sticking point. It's dark. It's a dark ending. And then you've got obviously the little girl outside that might have tricked people to go in and stuff like that. No, that's a different episode. There you go. I'm getting confused to something completely different. It's a different episode involving a fucking house. That is not in this. That is not a good sign.
That's not good. I think that is a bit of an issue with this episode. It's just right off the bat of saying its title. It doesn't really spring, like, not many things come to mind like when you say the title, but I remember this being, like you said, quite a simplistic episode that is just a traditional sort of ghost story about a haunted house. So I quite like that. I'm quite a traditionalist in that way. I do like haunted house stories. And I remember the whole thing with the ghost couple coming down the stairs saying they say they're going to come down and stuff like that, and that being quite creepy, and them looking quite ghostly and stuff, and that was cool. But
okay.
And the ending with the three kids, where it's like almost it's insinuated that they had just died as well, like you said, quite dark. But there's nothing too exceptional about it, so I would probably put it right in the middle.
What an okay.
Oh, again, if it was in between, I suppose meh. I suppose
Meh.
meh. Because you said it's not very memorable. There's not really too many things without me having to like refresh my memory. Yeah, meh's okay.
Meh is good enough. Okay, this is a fascinating one because I think you can come from this from two angles. This is Don't Go to Sleep. On the one hand, you can criticize heavily the lack of a coherent plot and a non-linear focus that it has. But on the flip side of that, you can kind of praise that it's quite imaginative, very unusual, has some extremely eccentric and over-the-top performances that stand out. I remember the judge. I remember the two agents that are chasing him. I remember all elements like that. So that kind of does work in its favor, but it is a fucking mess of an episode.
It is a complete and total mess, but for me, this is just such a memorable episode. I always have this episode in my mind when I think of Goosebumps, so I don't even need to like look it up. So I think that to me that just says a lot about it. In that maybe it's not necessarily good. That it's like you said, a complete train wreck, really. But it's so over the top, so creative and ridiculous.
Creative is the word.
I can't really hate on it for that because at least I was entertained throughout it, and for that I would probably put it in good. That's my opinion.
No, I agree. You've just that there. In fact, you used the word creative, and bear in mind what we've started with in this season. We didn't really have anything creative, so this stands out really impressively amongst particularly what came before and also kind of what comes afterwards. Because then we have Click. Now, there is some creativity in this. The problem is this isn't an original story in regards to seeing this done before in various different formats, in various different ways. And while I remember it often mainly because of who it stars, is of course the actor who had previously been in Attack and a Mutant, which was a debatable one that we had argued over. It's here, he doesn't quite have as much fun to do with, as it's mainly just here's a remote, turning things off, and it really gets bogged down, heavily bogged down, with the whole I froze my sister and dog, and then the remote what work aspect.
Yeah, I agree, but I do think to a certain degree you are just hating on it because Skipper's in it and you hate Skipper. That's what it is. But yeah, it's one of those ones for me where you have this cool idea with an object that does something like fantastical, but it's in a Goosebumps episode, and then they use it in the most bland, boring way possible. I know it's a kid using it, but the fact that he is a kid, kids normally can be quite imaginative. So, take that remote, do something more interesting with it. Like you said, all he does is uses it to turn his sister's volume down or pause her, and it has some fun moral implications and things like that. But yeah, they just have taken something that could be super interesting and made it really boring. So for me, I put it in meh.
Higher or lower than House of No Return, though?
Lower, lower.
Right. Yeah, I'm down with that. Mare works for me because it is very much. And I'm going to lean into this appearing in Mare, if not the worst as well. It's an old story. Two kids' aunt ends up transforming them into old people so they can be married off to her friends. Now that there, saying that out loud almost sounds fun. Like, or being married off to her clients, really. And that aspect is fun. Problem is this is just bogged down. That aspect is just kind of brief, and instead it kind of gets bogged down with watch these two kids get old. It also has a really dumb sort of resolution and finale, including a really cheesy final line where it's like, oh my God, he's eating the baby food and now he's gone really small and younger. What am I going to do? That I don't like. I don't remember finding this one particularly exciting or interesting.
Yeah, I do think, again, it does hit the nail on the head of being at least memorable. Remember the makeup effects of them getting older, looking good. The the whole prune juice thing with the aunt, it's certainly just interesting. It's interesting, and I remember the effect of her at the end being burned by the prune juice. Being like, that was a nice effect, but it's just all around a weird episode. We mentioned before about how it'd be a bit odd if their roles were reversed and how that wouldn't really be appropriate, but it's
Yep.
in this way. So I
Mare
do think it
again.
is. I do think it is very memorable. I mean, yeah, it'd be a stretch to put it in. Okay, I think it's meh. Yeah,
I'm leaning towards the end, though. I think Click and The House of No Return might go higher.
I'd say so. Yeah.
Right, yeah, right, the end of it then. And sticking with not very memorable ones, it's the Barking Ghost. This is the transformation into dogs story. Dogs that fucking float through walls, pirates that apparently fell into the transformation tree at the very, very start. Eventually the kids will be transformed as well. It has one particularly fun scene, which is when the pirates have turned into the kids and are sitting at the dinner table and being quite wild and unruly. That is fun. But that's about it. This is not that good, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like a toss up because before this episode, the ones you just talked about, if the whole season up to that point had been such like so really wacky and weird and over the top, and then suddenly this episode takes it back to a more serious tone. So I guess you might enjoy that it's done that, but we wanted maybe more serious is good, but serious and boring and slow is not good. I would take an old story over something like this. That's just my opinion when it comes to Goosebumps.
Yeah,
So
the
even though
worst.
yeah, there are certain aspects of it that are not bad. Like the acting in it is good, and yeah, but
Do we
it's not great.
do we put it at right? The worst, I agree. Do we put it below or do you think My Best Friend Invisible, because of its mad ending, is better though?
I think so. I think I
Right.
will always stray more towards like the weirdness of Goosebumps being like a positive than, like I said, boring and slow.
Fair enough. And then we get the first two-parter of this season is One Day at Horrorland. One I was very, very excited to rewatch, being quite a memorable book and a memorable episode as one I actually could picture in my head elements of it previously seen. It is delightful. However, on rewatch, it does have slow moments. It does have moments maybe don't quite capture the imagination as much as I remembered it doing. But I weighed it up with the good outfits, the costumes, the kind of puns and references to monster stuff, the clever game show finale, all that sort of stuff kind of works in its favor for me. I think this is a high up one.
It's definitely a high up one. There's a lot to like about it, and the sets are so imaginative. Just the idea of this Horrorland theme park and how interesting that is. Like you said, the game show and the monsters watching like TV and they're seeing all the human related like puns and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to like about this. But like you said, on rewatch, there's certain things that maybe haven't aged quite as well. Some of the effects and props and stuff look a bit cheap and whatnot. But yeah, it's I think like the best is really reserved for really the pinnacle of like good shit.
Yeah,
I feel like this is it's definitely good, but is it the best? Is it like the best. You know, that's the
No,
question.
I don't think it is, and I think mainly because of the slow moments. When I think of it, I do think of all that walking through the woods and stuff like that, and
The parents running
times when
around looking for the kids, and yeah, it does drag a little bit in places, and
so I think it's good.
yeah, yeah, and that's no like negative to be put into good, is it? So I think that's a solid place for it.
No, the question is, does it go above or below? Don't go to sleep.
I put it above it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Want to make sure, see if you were
I'm not going
same.
to argue that. I'm not going to argue that one.
Okay, the haunted house game. It's just one massive board game advertisement. A
Yeah.
clever use of a set with some very imaginative ideas, such as the ghost ship coming sailing in, which look really cool and all that. All of that works. However, the overarching story as to why they're in the game, and then the villains are revealed, and it turns out the kids are actually ghosts of trapped people that came before them, and then we have the ending with the little girl. This to me is middle. It looks good. There's some imaginative ideas, but I don't remember much about the main plot.
That's true. The plot is not what I remember anything really about, or the characters, but I do remember those great sets. So it deserves to at least go in, I'd say, okay, just for that
Alongside,
reason.
alongside Shock and Shock Street. That's exactly why we put Shock and Shock Street in there.
Yeah, you could, you were basically echoing the same opinion pretty much. Yeah.
Above or below, though.
Ooh, I don't know how you feel about that, but I might stray to putting it slightly above, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm going to say below because Shock and Shock Street has a better eccentric adult character and a better twist ending.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Okay, we've also got next one is a two-parter as well, as we are looking at Perfect School. Oh, this is a hard one. This is about being this is tough because this is about being the kid being sent off to a school that's basically military-like, where they're going to transform you into the perfect student, and he uncovers a kind of plot that's about replacing them with clones that are well behaved and how that plays out. And that concept there is very traditional horror. There are elements of that. I mean, think of something like The Faculty from the mid-90s, which is about the teachers being replaced by aliens and stuff like that. So there are elements of like that. I remember the main character being quite cool as well. I also remember some of the wackier elements. The wackier elements saw them giving us military time, but always using random, like it'd be 11:37. 6:43 and stuff like that. Then there were a lot of side characters, including one that turns out to be a villain at the end, which was a nice twist.
Yeah.
Shit, it's quite good, isn't it?
I'm a little bit torn as well because I've seen this episode quite a few times in the past, and it's one of those ones that I feel like aren't that interesting upon a rewatch. Like initially, it's quite exciting when you don't know where it's going to go, but then when you do, sitting through some of the slower moments and the chit chat between the characters, and there is like a lot of talking in this. This is the kind of episode of Goosebumps where it's just quite talky, and like there's little things that do happen that keep you intrigued and stuff like that that build the mystery, but it's not like that exciting in my opinion. So I would probably put it in. I'd probably put it in okay, just because like it is a very solid, well-made piece of television. Like the production's good, the acting's solid, and the all-around story and how it goes from A to Z is pretty good. But it's just not that exciting to me. Like in terms of it being Goosebumps, yeah.
I think that when we talked it through in the separate Getting Goosebumps episode, that is what we came down to. I'm happy enough to put it on okay, but top of okay, purely because it is telling a very coherent and understandable story.
Yes, very solid, no doubt. But...
Let's Go Hear It is Werewolf Skin, another two-parter. But I almost want to put Werewolf Skin in the best for three reasons. I'm going to give you three reasons why I think it belongs in the best, even though it probably doesn't. One, the idea behind of the werewolves in this, that is different. It is something special. The second part of that ties into the ending, where they actually make it almost like an addiction, which is a fascinating approach to take. And the third is a mixture of the main character hitting the werewolf skin with a shovel, which is funny, and then those werewolf skins blowing up in a practical explosion at the end. I mean, that's some good shit. The question is, though, around that, does it work as good? Is it not a bit boring in places? Is it not a bit silly? I think we question some of the things we saw at the end that not make sense, like the car being destroyed. What happened there? And
one of the things we questioned primarily, at least, was that why they had the kids to come and stay with them at all when they are werewolves who remove their werewolf skin and blah blah blah. That was just completely nonsensical. But there is a hell of a lot to like about this. I remember commenting on how I thought this just felt like a really genuine, solid horror short with a lot of tension, intrigue, nice effects. Acting was great, and like you said, it's such an original idea with werewolves, which is really difficult to come by in horror. So it deserves some credit for that. I don't know if it can go quite to the best because I don't think it's as memorable as some of the better episodes. Like if a year from now I mentioned werewolf skin to you, probably might not remember. I mean, maybe you would, but
what I would remember it, I reckon, but what I wouldn't remember maybe is that it was a two-parter.
That's true. That's true because it is a two-parter. It is stretched a little thin in places, and you have to kind of like go along with some of the meandering and whatnot. I put it into good. Yeah.
Better than One Day at Horrorland?
Ooh, that's tough because I feel like One Day at Horrorland is more memorable, and I have more like nostalgia like attached to that episode. So, and just no, I'll put it below. I put it below.
Yep, same. But I do think it's better than Don't Go to Sleep.
I do agree. I do agree.
In the middle, there we go. Fair enough. We've still got nothing in the best, and awesome.
Is that about to change? Is that about to change?
Unfortunately not. Awesome Ants. Look, it's a terrible story, aside from a couple of things, which are some cool practical effects involving giant ants, and an ending that I find delightfully dark, even if it's one of those that you could never see coming in a million years. So it's almost nonsensical to a degree. It's done in a way that made me go, huh, okay then. Be honest, man, this is it's just not that good when it comes to the actual how we get there.
I thought this was fairly an underrated episode in a lot of ways because it's not one that I think would ever really be mentioned among like top episodes that anyone would talk about.
Agreed.
Like you said, the twist is a really good one, and there are lots of aspects of it that feel rushed and like need fleshing out in terms of. But in terms of like it being a fun horror short for like kids, I thought it was actually pretty good considering what the subject matter is about.
Okay.
There's a lot of just some bad effects, like you said, with the CGI ants, but then there's some good effects. So it's a bit hit and miss. So maybe it deserves to go sort of middle of the road for that reason.
Well, I was going to put it in okay, near the top of okay, perhaps above Perfect School. But you're saying good.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to put it in okay. I'm happy to put it there above Perfect School. I think it's in fine company.
It's that ending. It's that ending that I just think is so good in Awesome Ants. That really wins it back for me. Yeah. Unfortunately, Bride of the Living Dummy for me is one of the major misses of season 3. Slappy hasn't had a good run in the TV series, hilariously. Arguably, only Night of the Living Dummy 3 was worth watching. And this does no different. This idea of having Slappy wanting to marry or fall in love with a girl doll and then reveal at the end for whatever stupid reason that actually no, it's the little girl he wants to marry, and then him fighting with the girl dummy and they're both dying and their souls coming out, and then we have this twist ending where his soul apparently goes into a boy and we get that hilarious look. This isn't that good. Annoyingly, what's annoying as well is it doesn't feel like a continuation from Night of the Living Dummy 3, as Slappy's just found on the street, perfectly intact, and taken it by a ventriloquist, who I do enjoy that section of things, but that again is just a plot device to get Slappy in the hands of the girls, and then we just do the repeat shit we've seen before, except there's less pranks in this. It's just him writing fucking message about wanting his bride. I want my bride. This is a bad one, I think.
If the idea of this was to make me sick of Slappy, then I think they really achieved that. Because like it actually annoyed me this episode a lot because it starts off with what I thought was going to be something different original with him and the ventriloquist. Adding Slappy with like an adult character now, which is different because you don't really ever see the adults get involved in those episodes. And then it just diverges into the same thing we've already seen done, but done worse. So, but it does have that funny sort of subplot of the father who's trying to break the world record for creating all those birdhouses, and that might be the most random thing in Goosebumps ever. So maybe it deserves to go pretty high up just for that alone.
We could that gets it out of the worst. I think that gets it in Mare at the bottom of Mare purely because my God, I'd forgotten about that. We made so many jokes during our episode talk through about what his bird house building meant for his relationship and marriage. We created our own story. So go watch that. Bottom of May, yeah?
Definitely.
Brilliant. All right, I remember this quite significantly. Our talk through, not the episode, so to speak. It is Strained Peas, a genuine contender for not just being the worst of this tier list, but the one of the worst overall, because it is fucking just rubbish. The baby comes home, he's jealous, turns out the baby is evil, which could have been fun in itself, but not how this episode does it at all. And then you get a stupid ending where the babies get handed back over, and it turns out that the actual baby, that he's the real one, the proper one, can also talk. And then he does that horrible freeze frame ending. Oh, brother. And it was just like, oh my God, I hate this episode.
Yeah, I don't know what they were trying to do with this one. It's just bad, isn't it? And you know, I'd always say Goosebumps. I think the worst thing you can do with an episode is to be forgettable, and I think this is just so forgettable. It's not worth. If there was an episode worth skipping, it's probably this one. So I'm not sure. I know we're not comparing, but what are in the other worst tier lists? But this could, if they were all in when we did the finale and do like if we put them all into one, for example, this could be quite dangerously low to being maybe the worst of all, which is pretty impressive, I suppose, by itself.
It's that there. That's why it's got to go in the bottom of the worst, bottom of the worst tier. Because we have My Best Friend is Invisible, and as stupid as that is, that ending with the faces is something. And we do have The Barking Ghost, which has a bit of traditional Goosebumps to it.
Oh, I mean they're great compared to this. So yeah,
there we go. It's there. And unfortunately, people, I'm going to be negative again. Say Cheese and Die again. A very disappointing follow-up to Say Cheese and Die. I remember this strongly purely because we had to record the talk through for this twice because of a screw up with the original file.
Then it makes me dislike it a little bit more. I had to talk for it 2 times when it's not very good, unfortunately. Even though I think we both remember talking about the original Say Cheese and Die and how we thought, while that was not particularly bad by any means, I don't think it deserves the adoration that maybe it has, just because the concept is so good with the killer camera and whatnot. But I don't think it's ever used very well across either of these episodes, because they can't really use it in a good way because it's a kids horror TV show and they can only do so much. And also they kill it in this episode because they literally introduce a way of reversing its effects, and that's just terrible. And there weren't, some aspects of the episode that weren't too bad, the makeup effects and blah blah blah. But I think, just without beating around the bush too much more, is it the worst, would you say? Or
I think Mare's a fair place.
I think Mare's fine. Yeah,
because I think it's a continuation, even with its problems. But Mare, maybe near the bottom. Do you think? Would you rather watch Bride of the Living Dummy or Say Cheese and Die again?
I'd rather watch the Say Cheese and Die again than anything with Slappy in it.
Old Story?
Below Old Story,
there. I reckon Old Story's above it.
Yeah, just about.
Just about. Okay, almost done with season 3, and is this a contender for the best, maybe? And it is a little unfair because we are technically doing 3 in 1 here, but it's the 3-parter trilogy. Squeal of Fortune, Strike 3 New Doom, and Escape from Carlsbad. However, all 3 episodes directly tie in and cross over each other. That is a very, very important aspect of this. It's why I see it as a triple episode rather than 3 separate episodes. Obviously, all based around the toy town of Carsville, with unique stories around 3 sets of characters who all interact in real life and then end up combining forces for the finale. This is really hard because, on the one hand, I always want to put it in the best for Carl, for the character of Carl, who is delightfully chewing the scenery for all 3. And there are some fun elements to it here and there, but unfortunately, a lot of the time it feels toned down. And you know what? If this was just Squeal of Fortune, the first one, and the third one, without the baseball one, I feel like it might be stronger. But that baseball one really drags it down.
It does. Yeah, I think, like you said, the guy playing Carl, he's up there for one of the most enjoyable performances of any actor in the entire run of Goosebumps. His performance is that fun. can tell he's having a great time. But it's I love the concepts, the idea of the miniature town and getting sucked into it. That's such a fun idea. The whole part of the first episode with the lemonade stand. There's some super memorable stuff throughout all three of these parts. But like you said, then there's the middle part is a big sag on the goodness, you know. So I think it can't go in the best just because of that middle episode with the baseball.
And that's
There
20
are,
odd minutes.
yeah, it is. It does drag, and there are some aspects to it that are silly, like when they originally dumped the board, the miniature town just on the curb after what happened and things like that. There are criticisms for sure. So I think it can go into good because as a trilogy, there's a lot of good stuff happening there.
I think the end, though, I think Don't Go to Sleep stays ahead of it.
I think it does. I think it does. Just
More
because,
imaginative.
yeah, because it is a three-parter. They could have done a lot more with it.
And we also criticized and said they missed a trick, for example, where like to make trilogy more interesting, which was Carl plays several different roles in it, yet doesn't play. And I think you were the one that mentioned it when Miss Carlsville is introduced, and it should have been Carl again, and that would have been an extra point just for that comedic
that would have
image.
Put it over the top if they got that one. Unfortunately,
Yes.
they didn't.
They didn't. And the end of season 3, we wrap up with something that is nowhere near the best. It is Teacher's Pet, a hilariously rushed, uninterested, nobody seemed to give a shit about this, with one of the worst effects in an ending possible, but effects poor throughout. Drags is really slow, is not interesting, doesn't have good characters, and doesn't even make sense in relation to what the fucking title is. As an adaptation of the book, it's different. There is no teachers in this. That's so stupid. It's called Teacher's Pet. Is it the worst?
This episode, man, it's not a good one. I mean, they bring back the actor who played Spidey, but he's completely like neutered in his role. Like he's just given the most mundane role when we know the guy's capable of doing good, like eccentric shit, and it's just like they're taking him and putting him in this boring position, and it's just so mundane, and the effect at the end is so bad, and they try and use real snakes and make them look like a threat, but they're nowhere near the kids, and the snakes aren't even acting threatening in any way. It's one of those ones where R.L. Stein is just he's taking every potential creature and trying to turn it into like a horror story, and this is just one that completely fails, I think. So
The
for me,
worst?
it easily goes in the worst, easily.
Better than Strain Peas?
I'm not sure it is because at least there's an aspect of Strange Peas that has like a weirdness to it. There's like a bit of like a weirdness that like I'd probably rather watch that again, if I had to.
It's
You think so?
alongside it.
I know. I mean, I did that whole big speech about how Strange Peas is probably the worst episode ever, but then now I come
This
into
is
this one, I'm
alongside
like,
it. Yeah, this is alongside it as one of the. You know what? There is no real ranking when it comes to things like the worst. So it's just in the worst. It's the worst
yeah,
episodes. It is.
I don't know which one's worse, to be honest. That's what I would say.
So there we go. That's season 3, and not a single episode we put in the best. However, at the end of this, when we do season 4, I'm going to come back to one in particular because I think it deserves potentially just to be put into the final round, basically. And then, for that, but we'll come back to that. First, we start with season 4, and it's the 2-part episode, How I Got My Shrunken Head. Of course, this is all about location, jungle magic, and Shrunken Head actually plays a very minor role into it, an important role, but a minor role in the overarching story, which is a well-told story, coherent with some nice twists and turns. It does have positives, a lot of positives about it. Good acting, good plot points, and a willingness to be imaginative. I don't really love the ending. That's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I think it's a very competently made 2-parter. There's nothing to really hate on. The production is good. You can tell they've got all these different locations, big casts, and there's some nice effects in it. I think the acting is really good, but they did rob us of the main kid. I think his name was Mark, and was it Jimmy, the pilot guy, dressed in the Elvis costume? They robbed us of them being in it more together, which I think drags down a little bit. But on the whole, it's not bad. So I'd probably put it just in the middle of the road for me.
Okay, all right. Better than Awesome. Would you rather watch Awesome Ants?
Yeah,
might, it might be better,
I think
Awesome Ants might be better, yeah.
Yeah, I think I might rather watch Awesome Ants.
Perfect School?
Hmm.
It's around there, isn't it?
It is around there. What do you think?
I think Perfect School tells a better story, a better horror story.
It does tell a better horror story. It's much better executed. It's more focused, and it doesn't have any, the like you said, the shrunken head is not really like it's not even like a necessary like aspect of the story particularly. So it's like, yeah, I think I got Perfect School being better.
All right, what about the Haunted House game? Above that?
Haunted House game. And I really like the sets and stuff in the Haunted House game. This just feels God. It's just. What do you think?
No, that's fair. All right, after Haunted House game, but above Shocker and Shock Street.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, there we
go
then.
But then the twist in Shocker and Shock Street is really strong. There's not really a twist in this, is there? It's kind of just that weird ending. The twist, I suppose, is that the power was in him the whole time, which I don't really like that anyway. So
no, we'll put it at the bottom of good. Of okay, sorry. Of okay. Okay, then we've got The Ghost Next Door, the two-parter. Look, I said it during the talk through, people. It's one of my favorite episodes overall. I think it is a genuine contender to be one of the best overall Goosebumps episodes of all 4 seasons. Its story is incredibly touching, dark, twisted, imaginative, clever. It's the best. It is the one that goes in the best for me.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it extensively in the actual episode discussion, but this is an episode that you could show somebody that has never watched Goosebumps. And while it maybe isn't the best example of Goosebumps itself, because it doesn't have maybe a lot of the weirdness and wackiness and comedic stuff, but it has like a solid like piece of just the creation of it, the production and the acting, and just a tragic tale, which you don't really get many of like highly emotional, tragic moments in Goosebumps like this, and it does really hit home very well. The way the mystery is developed and stuff is really well done, and it works well on repeat viewing, even if you know the twists. So for me, I'm happy to put it up there in the best for sure.
Yeah, I expected as much when we talked through the episode. We felt very passionate about it. And I'm wondering if this is where Cry of the Cat maybe deserves to go as well, because if we're talking imaginative, this is obviously an incredibly meta double episode that utilizes the idea of cast making a film within a film and then tying it into that, including making a lot of meta references and jokes to Goosebumps in general, as well as parodying elements of horror from Pet Sematary to The Exorcist and elements like that. It is quite fun and silly in that regard. The only the negative side is it, and I don't know if this is fair, because just because it didn't go in a direction I wanted it to go in, does that mean it should be marked down? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the word that I kept coming to when we discussed this was creativity, and I think it has that in spades. I love the concept and the opening with the whole parody of The Exorcist and with the cat and stuff like that. That's right up my alley, like I said, super funny. And some of the performances in it, I feel like all the actors completely got the memo and how they deliver their lines. Everything is really enjoyable. But then there is that second part which does drag a little bit to the finale, which is satisfying. Especially that very final shot with the sort of mocking Goosebumps itself, very meta about how Goosebumps always has twists. I just think on the whole, it's a really enjoyable watch.
The best.
I feel very entertained throughout it. I think I'm happy to put it in the best.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you've just nailed it there. Even though it's got that slow sort of start to episode 2 of the two-parter, it picks up its pace so nicely in the end, and it's engaging. I'm gonna remember this one for a while.
I'll definitely remember this one. I agree.
And one I would happily forget and I'd like to forget and will forget, it is Deep Trouble, the two-parter, which is, of course, the story of Deep Trouble 2. Look, guys, this one's just completely boring. It's just a boring episode, a double episode that drags its feet, has no interesting elements, some terrible effects, and an ending that just makes you go, all right, that's the end. Okay, then.
Yeah, again, one of the things I focused upon was the fact this is the closing moment for the series, this episode, and what came before it, which would have been such better ways to end, and especially with the Cry of the Cat, that final moment with the tongue-in-cheek thing about twists and stuff like that have been such a better way to close it out. But they decided to go and put this one in there, which I think makes me be a bit harsher on it, because it's just such a mundane episode that just reverts back to some of the more generic and cliche moments from Goosebumps that we've like across this whole discussing the episodes have like highlighted and criticized. And yeah, I just would rather not remember it, so I'm happy to put it in the worst.
And the worst, we've got let's start oh my goodness me. All right, so we've got Teacher's Pet at the bottom.
Ooh, Teacher's Pet.
Fucking
I think
hell.
Teacher's Pet is probably, oh man, it is tough, because at least Teacher's Pet is at least a singular episode, whereas
that's
this is
it,
across
isn't it?
2 parts, which hurts it more.
There you go, right at the bottom. Because it's a 2-parter. That's why. If it was a single episode, we might be more forgiven, but it's not. It's a fucking 2-parter.
How dare it?
How dare it? Exactly that. And that's all the episodes. We've only put 2 in the best, which is, and both are from season 4, Cry the Cat and The Ghost Next Door. I want to come back to 1. And mainly because I think it might deserve to be in the final, because it won't get to go through. And I think maybe One Day at Horrorland might deserve to go in the best as a challenger. And even though it probably isn't going to be up there at the end, I feel like it deserves to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. It's one that if we were talking about the best episode of Goosebumps, it's just one that always comes to mind, even though, I think it does deserve to be there. I think it's one that I feel a little bit bad about if it wasn't.
It feels wrong. It feels wrong. Like, I feel like that might be, you said, we talked about Ghost Next Door, about being not the Goosebumps episode you should show people. But you're going to argue One Day at Horrorland might be the best example to show someone, say, this is Goosebumps.
That's a great show. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I think it does epitomize everything about Goosebumps in that one episode. So, and while, like we said, there are some things that are not great about it, it definitely deserves to be in the conversation.
There you go. 3. We'll move on then. I think that's fair. That's 3 to go to the final. Look out for that tier list coming in the future. But for now, this is season 4 and season 3. Our opinions. You got any thoughts? Do you think you're a bit harsh on the likes of Strained Peas and Deep Trouble and all that? You know what to do. Let us know in the comments.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?